Now we come to our story behind the story segment where we talk about our guests and their backstory, what got them into publishing, maybe what they're currently working on. So, Adam, we know you have been in the traditional publishing sphere and you've done some self-publishing as well. So tell us, what's your origin story as an author?
My origin story. My mother is a famous children's book author named Jane Yolen. If you've had any of the How Do Dinosaurs Say Goodnight books, or Owl Moon. Yeah. So that's my mom. So at, age 7 or 8, when you're keeping a little journal, a lot of kids did that. Mine would come back every morning, edited in red, with a prompt for the next day's journal. So it has a very early education in writing, possibly a little Skinner-esque. So, and all her friends were writers and illustrators in Western Massachusetts. So I grew up around, Tommy DePaula and Eric Carle, Norton Juster, the Phantom Tool Booth guy, and all these people. I was just exposed to that a lot as a young man. And then my father was head of the computer science department eventually at UMass. So I came from a very academic background. So they were pretty disappointed when I dropped out of high school at 16 and moved out moved in with some speed freak bikers. Because I like to call myself the world's most disappointing child prodigy. At 12, I was nearly fluent in French and played the cello and was working on math theorems with my dad. But I had a major depression, anxiety attack disorder, and severe to moderate ADHD. And then got several concussions as well. One really bad one, which didn't help the process at all. Yeah. And so in the 1980s, we didn't have the vernacular, the drugs, or the therapy to deal with any of that. So I was what's known as a juvenile delinquent. So, I went from straight A's in 7th grade to failing in the 10th grade and quit. Went to an alternative school for a while with 7 kids in it, and even that was too much structure. So I quit that as well and became really a full-time alcoholic musician till the age of 36 when I finally got a diagnosis. Yeah. So, but it led to a very interesting background. I mean, I was like a real life outlaw for a couple of years there in my youth. Moved out to Minnesota, didn't clean up, but slowed down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then finally, like I said, at 36, got my diagnosis, and I started writing professionally late. I think my first book that I wrote a bunch of books with my mom and 2 on my own. I think the first was in 2006. It came out, or early 2000s. Because kind of with that upbringing and my personality and mental issues, I rejected being a writer quite strongly for a while there, but then fell into it quite easily when it finally came about. And I managed to keep ties open to my parents despite what was going on. So it was, so then I've done a lot of weird stuff in my life and meet a lot of weird people and visited a lot of prisons, visit a lot of friends in prison, and got myself in dodgy situations that I then had to talk myself out of, or fight or run my way out of. And it all helps kind of inform the writing. And I tend to write very, very dark and violent stuff because that's kind of how I saw the world for a long time. But it was very funny. Someone was talking, I was online, and they were talking about how someone was yelling at him for writing bright, fluffy books, with happy endings and stuff. And I said, look, everything I write is dark, bleak stuff, and I think you should definitely write fluffy, fun stuff. There needs to be that out there, and I will be providing none of it. So I want people to write that, Am I going to read it? No, but it has to be there. Someone needs to write this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you say, and we were talking about this earlier, the experience, your life experience informing your writing. So what genre have you published in and written in? Because I've got some guesses based off of what you told me, but maybe
let's hear the guesses. Let's hear.
Well,
and we'll see how close they
you
are.
you did mention like
The
Rockstar,
fantasy.
right? So,
Uh,
right. There was some music. So I'm guessing that we're talking something crime related. I don't think we're necessarily. I don't know. I don't know that we're necessarily in the thriller category, but I know like there's got to be some criminal element in there somewhere. Whatever it looks
There
like.
is often a bunch of criminal elements. So
Yeah.
with my mother, I wrote a bunch of YA and middle grade fantasy stuff.
Okay.
And my first two books were fantasy, but one of the reviewers called it fantasy noir. It was another one called it nihilistic. So it was very much urban. It was, but very much written in a crime fiction manner. I've
Mhm.
always read primarily fantasy and, when I'm reading fiction reading, I read fantasy, science fiction, crime, mystery, thriller, a lot of that. And I like to really, I'm a guy who so the top shelf back there is all books on writing. When I decided to write, like Emma, I bought all the writing books I could find and read all of them and really just spent a year or two reading those and really kind of working on the craft. And what I really like to do was take the books I liked or found engaging and break them down to the sentence level of what is this author doing? Like up until recently, I really enjoyed all the Lee Child Reacher books. All right. Are they great fiction? No. Are they even good fiction? Probably not. Are they entirely engaging and you'll read them through in one sitting? Yes. So one of the things I did was break down a bunch of those and say, what is he doing at the sentence level that drives this along? And I adapted some of that to my own writing intentionally. There's a thing he does with partial sentences and dropping the subject from sentences, which both works it's an interesting technique because it both works in writing action scenes for it to go along smoothly, but it also works in quick stop emotional beats where it slows it down. It's interesting, but learning how to do that was fun. Another thing that you won't get from AI. But so then I do actually have a thriller series that I'm in the middle of. But it's horror thrillers with some there might be zombies involved, but really an action thriller. But then the main character is a sociopathic hitman. May or may not be based on some people I met in real life. Not an actual hitman, but definitely could have done the job if it was to his inclination.
Yeah.
And then the fantasy series, very much grimdark. Very, very violent stuff. I'm a big fan of bringing realism into fantasy. Most of what the reading I do now is history. So I read a lot of ancient and medieval history just to, and it's interesting. I do a lot of talking about the level of accuracy in your books and what it needs to be, because we've already gone past the wide ranging topic, so I won't really cover it, but it's really, it can be very genre based, and and there's still limits on it. Like I do pretty accurate fantasy stuff, but honestly, I'm bad with fabrics. All right. And if you look at it, how fabrics are made and how they got traded back and forth and the history of it is a huge driver of civilization and changes in civilization. And I flat ignore it because I cannot, as they say, be arsed with it. It just doesn't grab my interest at all. So I try and be very realistic in like small group tactics, big group strategy, logistics, of the movement of armies. And, and another interesting thing, you can do that without making a big point of it. A guy, staff sergeant, does great breakdowns on fantasy stuff. And he points out that all the logistics of the armies in Lord of the Rings are perfect. They're exactly what armies with that equipment, how they split them, how they moved them, how that would have to happen. And that is not something you would think. When you think Lord of the Rings, you don't think, well, the tactics and the logistics of the orc armies, chef's kiss, was perfect. No one has ever said that. But when they did a deep dive into it, it's like, yeah, he was a World War I veteran. He understood why armies had to move and split up in separate ways and what it took to move, and he applied that. But he made no big deal of it. But it's part and parcel to my whole theory of internal consistency helps with suspension of disbelief. and it helps
Yeah.
your book resonate in a way, especially when you're doing genre fiction. You need to get those details right. That internal consistency, like in a magic system or in space opera, in the technology, that's like the gravity of the story, where when it's great, no one notices it, but it holds everything together. And now the characters react with that. Without having to say that it's there, the characters react to it, and it gives them an internal realism that helps. We've drifted
Now,
far off my story. My origin
That's
story. We've
okay.
drifted far away
That's
from that.
okay. And you said something I want to circle back to because I told you I like to geek out on editing. On
Mhm.
Written Well, you said you have a course or something on editing, or where is that? How can we find that? Or talk about what's in the course.
What is in the course? The course is writing the novel, and it is
Okay.
a full course from finding an idea. I'm a big guy on the ideas are all out there. Ideas are easy to get. Finding one that's going to work for a novel is harder. I talked about correlating my ideas. Eventually you start to learn, oh wait, this is a short story idea, not a novel idea. Or you start a short story and you're like, I was going to write this 4,000 word short story, but now I have to put it aside because it's a novel. But
Yeah.
so from the writing of it all the way through the editing and the revision process. So drafting, and split into 3 sections, which is really getting started, the first draft, revision. And I'm really proud of the revision stuff because it's stuff that gets short shrift, I think, in a lot of the discussion on writing, is that importance. They talk about the importance of the editing process, and then they're kind of like, rewrite it, write it better.
And I don't hear a lot of authors talking about layering, so that makes me trust that your course might fit me really well.
Excellent. Yeah. The multiple passes is essential to me. But again, it's, I always tell people, look, if someone is telling you how to write, they're just trying to sell you something. If they tell you how they write, and then, more importantly, tell you why they write that way, that's going to be helpful to you, because you don't learn to write, you learn how you write. My very first agent told me that. She said on the phone, well, you're just learning how you write. And it really struck me. She was a great, just an absolute, one of the original New York agents. She was tough as hell. But that stuck with me. It's like, you don't learn to write, you learn how you write. So in all these books that I read, the best ones were always, here's what I do, here's why I do it, here is some ideas for how you could achieve the same results. Because it's results oriented. Here's how I achieve it. Here's why I do it that way. If you can't do it that way, try and pick a way that gets you the same results, because I'm doing these things for a specific reason.
Right.
So not everyone is going to.
Is there anything in your courses that talk about how when you do accidentally hit the market, maybe with your first orca book, how to iterate that, even if it was a complete accident and you don't normally write warm and fluffy?
Do it again, only better. Well, I mean, you can borrow some stuff from the old theory of albums in the music business. So I came over to writing from the music business, which was great because it meant the publishing industry seemed positively above board and trustworthy compared to the music business. But one of the rules of that is you have your debut album, and then your second album should be exactly the same, and then your third album should be something completely different. So if your first book hits, you want your second book to be very similar, and then your third book, give it a twist. And if people have followed you there, then you're going to have them hooked. Now you've got a fan. Because that last little twist in the third book that goes, oh, now I can follow this person because you're like, give them what they want again, and then let them know that you're going to grow with them, and then you're good. Yeah. So that's kind of the theory of it. How you do it, how you get excited to write something that you didn't want to write. Sometimes maybe you write the next one with a co-author. Maybe you guys decide that you're hiring a ghostwriter. And it's, half of it, I would never do a full ghost written thing, though that's perfectly acceptable as well. But you could do a credited or uncredited co-author. I do a lot of co-authoring, and I love it because when you get a good co-author, you can just lean on each other's strengths, and you can go, I don't need to write this scene because this person, you can say, they get to write all the fight scenes.
Yeah.
But I mean, you just have the same problem as with any book, is just sitting down to write. And I feel like if your Warm and Fluffy hit big, I mean, you should be able to ride that excitement a little bit into sitting down and getting at least halfway through the bugger. You know what I mean? You're like, you know what? Today I'm just gonna shut my eyes and think about the money. Wow, I'm inspired as hell. And then the middle of the book is hard anyway. Even if you love what you're writing, the middle's a slog, man. So
It is. No matter what.
Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.